Welcome to our YouTube channel, Rahul Sengupta. Today we are going to take up a very famous poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. This poem, I suppose, figures in different syllabi of different classes. Now, Robert Frost, primarily an American poet, is known for his very simple language and profound thoughts. In this poem, which is a trademark kind of his poetry, we have the poet visiting a forest area which is stunningly beautiful at that point of time because of winter darkness, snowfall, a bit of a blustery wind, and extremely silent conditions. The poet is spellbound to see everything around. He doesn't want to meet anybody right now. He is there, standing still, enjoying, or rather feasting upon the stunning beauty of the surroundings. His horse, however, looks at the matter from a different perspective. The poet supposes that his horse is a little restless. He is not happy about standing there in the wilderness without any food or shelter. Obviously, under the cold conditions, he is probably, that is, the horse is probably freezing. The surroundings keep the poet spellbound. But towards the end of the poem, the poet suddenly starts feeling that he has got to go. Why? Because he has promises to keep, even though the woods are lovely darkened, that is, woods are still spellbinding. The poet has to shake off, or rather shake himself out of the spell and move on because he has promises to keep. That is, he has some missions or some obligations to meet, which is why he has to come out of the spell and move on. So towards the end, suddenly, this poet stopping in the forest, being spellbound by the surroundings, become a metaphor for any such experience when we feel frozen by awe or surprise at things which fascinate us. At the same time, the reality is such that we cannot afford to stall ourselves there forever. We have to move on because we have promises to keep. That is, we have our life's duties to meet or carry out. That is suddenly, in the last part of the poem, the poet becomes profoundly philosophical. And as we look back the previous three stanzas of the poem, we cannot but feel that the poem is metaphorical as well as a realistic description of an experience. Now, let's do the poem word by word. So here is the poem for you. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Now, before we get into the first stanza, a statutory request to all the viewers. Please subscribe this channel, Rahul Sengupta, if you happen to like it, if you find it useful enough for you. And our WhatsApp number is this. In this number, you can post your comments. Of course, you can post them in the YouTube channel itself. Otherwise, you can send in your suggestions, your criticisms, whatever, if any. Now, let's go to the first stanza. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So you see, there's a description and also a very deft use of rhyme and rhythm. Whose woods? Right from the word go, you have an alliteration. These are, I think I know. That means the poet personally knows the person who is the owner of this woods. But his house is in the village. In spite of that, the poet does not like to meet him right now. He will not see me stopping here. In other words, the poet would not like to see the person, the owner of the woods, as well as his acquaintance, to watch his woods fill up with snow. So this line, that is the last line of the first stanza, gives us some idea of what the scene is like. The woods fill up with snow, that is, a snowfall is on. Now the second stanza. My little horse must think it queer. Queer means odd. To stop without a farmhouse near. That is, the poet now looks at the thing from the perspective of his little horse. Now the question arises whether the poet was on a horseback or on a self-driven horse carriage. We don't know. Probably he was on a horseback. To stop without a farmhouse near. A farmhouse is going to give the horse some rest, some food maybe, and some shelter from the freezing cold. Between the woods and the frozen lake tells you how cold it is. A snowfall is on, and at the same time, you see, the lake is frozen. And the poet is standing in a kingdom of silence between the woods and the frozen lake. And we can imagine that he is frozen too, not probably by the cold, more so by the overwhelming beauty of the place and the darkest evening of the year. Poet is not a meteorologist or a geographer. He is not supposed to know that it is the darkest evening of the year. So what does he mean? He wants to mean that the evening was indeed very dark. So it is a hyperbolic statement. I guess you know what hyperbole is. Hyperbole is a kind of figure of speech that is of exaggeration. Like if we say that he is an elephant, we do not surely mean, like if we say Panchu is an elephant, it doesn't surely mean that Panchu is as fat as an elephant. For us, an elephant or hippo is the last word for obesity or fatness. So Panchu is an elephant means that Panchu is fat in an exaggerated sense. That is what the hyperbole is. Now the third stanza. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The horse is restless. Probably he is not happy about his worry of being stranded in such cold conditions, all alone, having nothing to do. So he's wondering if there is some mistake by the poet. That is, the horse is impatient. He wants to go away. At the same time, you see this tinkling sound of the bell is very prominent, sounds very prominent in the overwhelming silence of the place. And what is the only other sound? The only other sounds, that is, it is treated as a singular. Apostrophe S is a contracted form of sound is. The sweep of easy wind and downy flake. It is winter time, so we can presuppose that the trees are without leaves. So the wind is having an easy passage. It is literally sweeping across the forest. And downy is feather-like. and flake refers to snowflakes. That means the snowfall is occurring, but it is not creating much sound. The only sound, apart from the sound of the harness bell, is the sound of the easy wind and downy flake combined together. At times you see when things are very silent, even little sounds can cause enormous impact. So is the situation here. So far we have a bit of description of the scene in the first stanza. The poet builds up the background narrative in the first stanza. In the second stanza, we are aware of the horse, the little horse, and the surroundings. Then, in the third stanza, the poet builds on the atmosphere. That is, there's a sound of harness bells. There's a sound of the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Here, flake, of course, refers to the snowflakes falling. Now into the last stanza. Sorry. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. Alliteration again. A slow bit of the poem. A pensive rhythm of the poem is there, which means that the poet was spellbound, and there is an uncanny, almost magical impact of the surroundings on him. But the second line of the fourth stanza, you see, starts with a linker of contrast. But I have promises to keep. So from this line onwards, there is a dramatic shift. So far, the poet described the atmosphere and how spellbound he was. Now, he refers to promises to keep. That means his responsibilities, his missions or duties, which are still left to be done. We can take it in two ways. Like it may be a particular promise that he has to meet, but you see promises here. So probably these are metaphors for life's responsibilities. One cannot sleep, rest, or die in peace with promises kept promises or responsibilities kept pending, and miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep. So the third and the fourth lines are same. It is a case of repetition, or it is also called anaphora. When a particular expression, be it a sentence or be it a fragment of a sentence, gets repeated, it is called anaphora. So this anaphora serves to emphasize how the poet looks at his experience. The poet means to say that irrespective of how beautiful, how fascinating, how spellbinding certain experiences are, one has to move on. Why? Because every man, after all, is a social animal. Every man, after all, has something to do for the fellow citizens of the society. And he cannot rest at ease before completing them. And you see, I sleep before I sleep. We can take the word literally. We can take this word or expression metaphorically as well. Sleep means sleep. That is, one sleeps after completing a strenuous journey. Sleep can also be a metaphor for rest. We can afford to rest after completing a mission. Sleep can also be a metaphor for death. That is, after life's journey is completed and all the responsibilities performed satisfactorily, one can die in peace. So the message goes that no matter how fascinating, how captivating, how spellbinding a particular experience is, one has to shake oneself out of that trance, out of that spell, to move on. So that's all about the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening for the time being. Once again, let me request to all of you those viewing this presentation to subscribe, if not subscribed already, to this channel, Rahul Sengupta. And for any kind of opinion, any kind of suggestion, criticism, one can easily post them in the YouTube itself and also in this WhatsApp number. And for today, that's all from YouTube channel Rahul Sengupta. Thank you.